Hello, I'm Jessica, a graduate student at the University of Texas at Arlington, and I'm going to be sharing with you today a discussion on cognitive learning theory, which focuses specifically on information processing. As you probably figured out, this theory focuses on how we process information. It compares our brains to computers, where we get all this external data in, processes it, and spits it back out. Now, how does this happen? Well, first we have three parts of the brain, starting with the sensory receptor. This is the area of the brain that gets in all the information from the outside sources. Everything we're seeing, smelling, hearing, all that information is coming in here. It then has to quickly decide what's important enough to keep, and what's not important enough to keep, it discards and gets rid of and forgets about. What is important enough to keep, it sends to the next box, which is our short-term memory. Now, the thing is, our short-term memory has a capacity of about 5 to 10 items for only about 10 to 15 seconds. So very little information can go here, and what does go here has to be filtered out quickly. So then the next question for the brain, is this meaningful information enough to keep or not? And it has 10 to 15 seconds to make that decision. If it's meaningful enough to keep, it sends it to this bigger box on the end, long-term memory, which has a limitless capacity. So all this happens very quickly. All this happens constantly. So understanding this can help us look at how we learn. Some people say that to get here, it's just memorization, and it's not really learning. But I'm of the theory that memorization is part of learning, and you need to use both of them. An example I have is math. When we're toddlers and we're just learning numbers, the first thing we learn after much repetition is how to count. So we have all these numbers coming into our sensory receptor. The brain's getting rid of them because they're not meaningful. Eventually it hears it enough, it's like, hey, let's go here to the short-term memory. And then some stay, kids, they never learn how to count all the way to 10 first. They get it out of order for a little bit, but the numbers are there in the short-term memory. Eventually, our brain realizes this is meaningful information, they've repeated it enough, and it goes down here into the long-term memory. And that's where they know how to count. So now we have counting in our long-term memory, the ability to count, in the order that the numbers go in. So then what's the next thing we learn when we actually get in school? Is how to add. So now we get a plus sign, plus and minus signs added into the equation. And then we finally realize, after hearing 2 plus 2 enough, we learn through these steps that finally, okay, that's just counting. 2, 3, 4. You start counting on your fingers. So you've memorized the order, and that helps you add this new information to it. Then eventually, we use the adding and subtracting and retain all that and memorize those basic facts of the 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 plus 2 is 4, all those, and we can start doing more complex equations because we have those basic facts memorized. We are able to learn more complex equations and eventually get into algebra and trigonometry because we have this information memorized. We're able to learn the complex stuff better. So how can we use this theory as teachers? We have to understand that it takes multiple repetitions for the brain to realize that something is important enough to keep. So as teachers, the important material in the text that we need to make sure the students hold on to is repeated, repeated, and repeated, and eventually it'll stick. And as students, we need to do the same thing and understand that if something is important, if the instructor's up there repeating it, write it down so you can go back later and read it over. That's where flashcards come in handy, and just constant working on your memory skills and making sure that you get that information in your long-term memory. And then you can assimilate what you have in long-term memory the new information coming into it. If you have something in your long-term memory, information comes into your short-term memory, your brain will say, hey, that kind of matches up with this over here. Let's hold on to that and send it over there. And then it gets over here and you can group it all together and figure it out. This theory is good because you can use it on learners of all ages and all levels. Like I said, from little bitty kids learning how to count all the way up to graduate nursing students and beyond, because everybody's brain processes information the same way. We just need to make sure that we understand that and are able to use those skills in order to learn the material. That is it. Any questions? Thank you for your time.